Hi all, and welcome back to my channel. And welcome to Unbeknownst to Y'all is attempt 2 on doing this particular video. I'd actually filmed it once before, did a fantastic job, was super happy with the footage, ready to edit the shiz out of it. And then I realized that as I was going through my phone and my computer, I had deleted said amazing footage before putting it on my computer. So here we are, round 2 of filming this. Hopefully I can be just as poignant, just as on par with myself with how I was last time, because y'all know sometimes when it comes to videos, especially ones that are more talky, sometimes it can get away with you. It can seem a little rambly, a little bit off whatever. So hopefully we will be able to succeed today. And what we are doing today is doing another installment, part 2, part whatever, of me talking about makeup releases and makeup content and stuff like that that I consider to be some of the most tone deaf, off color, off-putting, just makeup that doesn't really sit well with me for one reason or another. I feel like some of these are sort of a universally accepted oy vey situation, and there are some that are more directed toward me and my specific morals and ethics and such like that, which is something important to remember. We all have different levels of morality, different things, opinions, all that sort of stuff. This is just me doing all kinds of talky. I love doing all sorts of reviews and all kinds of, oh, look at the pretty makeup. But I also like looking at makeup in a more subjective light, because I feel in today's modern day market, you kind of have to. And in our enlightened beauty community today, we aren't so willing to let companies get away with dumb shiz. So I'm just going to be talking about those things here. If you haven't seen the original part 1 of this, I will leave that shiz linked down below. These usually tend to be a bit lengthier videos, so go get you a monster, go get you some mac and cheese, and sit your butt down, and let's just go on into some makeup that is tone deaf, that is off color, that is just a little bit off-putting, in my opinion, for one reason or another. Okay. As we learned with the first installment of this, a couple of these particular points are sort of sounding boards rather than just the product in and of itself. There are some releases and some particular items that kind of are a not so subtle foreshadowing of a deeper problem within the community. You look at it and yeah, maybe in its start you're like, that's a little bit off whatever, but if you dig even deeper, there are even more layers beneath this release that are a problematic subset ideology within the community that is sort of internalizing the issues that this product has. So we're going to start out with one example, although we will talk about a couple different ones. I figure we might as well address a Hallmark makeup release, a sort of very resounding oops that had the community rightfully upset. And that is when Tarte, in all of its knowledge and wisdom, decided we're gonna take Shape Tape, which is the concealer. I love it. I'm using it today. We're gonna slap that name on a foundation bottle, and then we're gonna release a shade range. That was one of the saddest, farthest attempts at inclusivity. I mean, if any of y'all remember that shiz, it was like 12,000 shades of beige, and then there were like 5 shades for the deep, dark, delicious melanin. I mean, there wasn't even a lot of like, caramel in the middle, it was just all kind of vanilla. We had a lot of ecru, we had a lot of taupe, we had a lot of eggshell, we had a lot of buff, we had a lot of sand, and then maybe there was like just a little, we had milk. We had creamer. We maybe had like just a hint of like caramel. Then we're just a little bit leading into butterscotch, and then anything deeper than that, Jesus take the wheel, it just wasn't happening. And so it always amazes me when these things actually come to fruition. Like, you've got your PR team, you're like, okay, we're formulating this shiz, we're doing this whole whatever, this is our shade range. And it always amazes me that there isn't a single person that raises their hand and just is kind of like,
are we really sure this is the best we can do?
Are we really sure this is the shade range we want to put out there for consumption? And the company, for some reason, is just like, yeah, that's good. Let's go roll with it. And then when they are aptly called out by the community for a blatant lack of inclusivity, they're then all like, wait, well, this is just the first wave. This is just the first initial set of shades. Because we haven't finished formulating all the rest of the shades, those people get to wait for us to finish formulating those. I am absolutely baffled by the thought process. I understand. I am not a foundation formulator. I don't know what goes into the formulation of the pigments that make up the face plaster. But I feel like if you've got enough whatever within you to take the time to formulate 25 different pasty shades, and you're able to create all sorts of different undertones for that shiz, we got yellow, we got brown, we got taupe, we got jaundice, we got every kind of undertone for that shiz. We can't maybe take a few more months and figure out how to formulate and undertone the other shades? Are they so freaking more complicated to make that it takes that much longer? And if you know that it takes that much longer, why don't you just wait? Why don't you just be like, okay, we know, we're smart, we are aware of how long it takes to formulate a deep, dark, delicious melanin foundation. And you take that and you wait, and then you post it, and then you release it, instead of trying to come out with this whole half thought out whatever, oh, well, we're going to do more shades in the future. You are putting a product out there that is going to be consumed by people within the country, potentially the world. America is a disgustingly diverse country, and you, as a mainstream makeup company, are unable to acknowledge and to accommodate the breadth of cultural, skin tone, all sorts of whateverness we've got going on. And so, I mean, we have that in and of itself. We've got the Tarte release. We had the Beauty Blender foundation release, that they released that and someone was all like, dang, did you all mess with that saturation? Or I think someone made a comment and Beauty Blender was all like,
that is not the original picture we released, somebody effed with it.
There's just, it's surprising, this lack of just like person, the gateway person to being like, yes, this is ready, this is good, let's release it. Like, who do they have for that? There needs to be someone there that's just like,
No.
You are not fully cooked yet. You need to go back to the kitchen, take your sad, undeveloped butt back into the drawing room, back to the drawing board, before we let this thing be a thing to the public. And part of what's frustrating and part of why I have issue with this is, okay, you have a company like Tarte, you have a company like Beauty Blender, you have a company like It Cosmetics, although they've apparently expanded somewhat. You have all these different companies that do all these different foundation releases that are continuously lax in a breadth of depth of color. And if you have it once, you're like, okay, it happened at Tarte, we all hue and cry, we were all kinds of whatever, rightfully so. And you think, okay, that draws attention to the issue, right? And the problem I have is it draws attention to the issue for a little bit. And then the next brand comes out with the next sad foundation line, and we're doing this all over again. And it's frustrating because this is an issue. This isn't an issue of like, oh, this brand has inconsistent quality. This isn't an issue of them creating crappy holiday limited edition palettes. This is a much deeper, more ingrained issue. On the outside, it may just seem like a sad, pathetic, little ignorant mistake done on the brand. So, okay. All right, I guess they didn't do as many shades as they could have. All right, slap on the wrist. Next foundation range you do, make it better. And that would be all well and good if it were one company. But it is a plethora of companies. A plethora of companies that continuously make the same mistake. At that point, it's not a mistake, it's a pattern of ingrained behavior. And the issue I have with this is that it really showcases the deep and ingrained lack of cultural diversity within a lot of mainstream makeup companies. The fact that it is something that is consistently happening shows that there isn't a foundation of inclusivity and that there isn't a lot of effort in wanting to change that. Like, yeah, once or twice, slap on the wrist, okay, whatever. But when it is this continued, constant routine of repeating the same foundations over and over again while not being able to accommodate another area of people, that shows to me that this goes so much deeper than just the occasional flubbed up shade range foundation release. It reveals so many more layers of this ingrained toxicity towards those of the deep, dark, delicious melanin. And that, I feel, is so much more troubling than just an occasional off-putting foundation release. It shouldn't be that every time it happens, we suddenly get all this hue and cry, everyone's upset, we create a whatever about it. It should be something that we are constantly advocating for, something that we are constantly calling to attention. Don't just wait for it to be one shock and awe sort of release. It needs to be something that's talked about and discussed and brought to attention all the time. Brands should always be held accountable, and it's something that I feel I get frustrated that it does kind of get that occasional, ooh, well, we have a shocking, uninclusive foundation, concealer, and setting powder range, and then we talk about it, and we get all hyped up, and we get all whatever, and we start the dialogue, and then it goes away until the next one, which once again, like I said, kind of just instills that belief that there really isn't any attempt at changing the underlining status quo of foundation shade ranges. It's not just the Tarte Shape Tape foundation. It's not just, have y'all seen like Christian Dior, Givenchy, Yves Saint Laurent, a lot of those like really, really high-end luxury foundations, they come out with like 12 shades. And they got like 10 of them for the middle-aged rich white woman, and then like 1.5 for the deep, dark, delicious melanin. It is clearly a problem. There is so much more underneath this than just an occasional uninclusive foundation range. It goes into, we're going into class, we're going into financials. There are just so many more things that are a part of this problem, socioeconomic, all sort of stuff like that, that are just, it's really kind of, if you sit there and you think about it, you look at it on the surface and you're like, okay, all right, whatever. But then you sit and you really think about all the underlying elements that make it seem to these companies that this is okay. It's really kind of disturbing. Obviously, this is just like touching the tip of that iceberg, but I really want to get more, I understand to a certain level it is, just makeup. But to another certain level, it really has grown and come beyond just makeup. There are so many different multifaceted layers to the sociology and everything of this that I think it's worth to really take a step back and think about what we're supporting, what we're doing, and maybe some of the underlying, I don't want to say micro, but those underlying aggressions towards the people of the dark, delicious melanin, because it is a thing. Clearly, it is a thing. I'm sorry, if you are a makeup consumer with half a brain cell, I feel like you can see that it is an issue within the mainstream makeup industry. So, obviously, that's just the tip of the iceberg with that. But I want to, move on talking about other things. We're going to talk about one that I was going to talk about in the first one, but I was like, we ain't got enough time to unpack this shiz. So we're going to go right into another hot topic. And that is the ever so controversial, the start of the end for Jeffree Star cremated palette. Now I'm going to start this shiz off saying I bought that palette. The last eyeshadow palette of his that I bought, I think it is a beautifully formulated palette. I'm also saying, to a certain degree, to my dark little whatever baby bat goth loving heart, it had a lot of stuff going for it aesthetic wise. However, that being said, aesthetic, there is a certain time and place for things. And part of what a lot of people had issues with, and rightfully so, was Mr. Jeffree Star decided, he was like, you know what? I'm gonna release this palette, I'm gonna release this collection right at the true cusp, right when things were really starting to get really bad, sort of at peak awfulness of the pandemic. So there are obviously a couple different layers, a couple different things that go into making this as tasteless as it was. First of which being the obvious, distasteful, the thematic naming of said palette, cremated, obviously it has to do with death. And at the time of this release, a lot of people were dealing with a lot of death. And quite a few people questioned whether that was an appropriate thematic turn to take with a collection. Because like a lot of things, like a lot of points I make on this channel, to a certain degree, it's just makeup. Should be really be getting that upset about it. Burp Squad. And then there's that second part that it is more than just makeup. There is a certain amount of social responsibility. And so to have this collection be released when it was at true just peak terribleness, the tolls were rising, it was like we didn't know, the level of uncertainty was so ripe and rife within the country that maybe Mr. Star could have benefited from timing this a little bit differently. And the one thing that I think that this doesn't make it right, doesn't make it right at all, but I do think that Jeffree Star, who, say what you will about him, whatever, the man is no dummy when it comes to business. And with that being said, I strongly believe that he honestly knew exactly what he was doing. There wasn't any, oh, well, it was planned and it was scheduled, so I guess we'll just, we have to release it because we can't push it back anymore. The man has enough capital in all of his other releases and all of his other what's that he could afforded to push it back a little bit. But in the world of Jeffree Star Cosmetics, I feel like there is a certain amount of any press is good press and no press is bad press. And so I wouldn't put it past him to look at the situation and say, you know what? I have enough level of super die hard fans right now. He still had that complete undying fan base that was gonna see his shiz sold out one way or another. Imagine if I release this and during this time it's gonna get talked about, it's gonna get discussed, it's gonna get plastered in YouTube videos, on Twitter, on Instagram. Whether it's positive or negative, people are gonna be talking about the Jeffree Star cremated palette. And I feel like a lot of times we don't really understand how impactful our own word of mouth is, even if it's negative. Like, yes, we need to call people out and we need to talk about things and discuss things that are important, but there are a lot of times that sometimes pouring all of that energy and effort in just directs that traffic toward the person we're trying to, not help. And there was just so much discussion and so much hue and cry. And I feel like, the dude knew exactly what he was doing. He knew the power of the press. He knew that this timing would not negatively affect his sales to the point that he would push it back. Like I said, he knew exactly what he was doing. Is that nasty? Is it disgusting? Is it sort of marketing on and benefiting off of the situation? Most definitely. I never said the dude was a nice guy. I'm just saying he's not a dummy when it comes to business. So it doesn't surprise me that he would have kept this release going on with the full knowledge that releasing it would create such shockwaves within the community that in turn would just bring back the press to him and his company. And it's like, does a part of me like and appreciate the aesthetic of the palette? Yes. I am a, emo, baby bat, goth, whatever at heart. Do I feel like it could have been done differently? It could have been timed differently? So yes, but I feel like one thing, aesthetic aside, because aesthetic, it only takes you so far. Aesthetic inspiration and aesthetic interpretation is great, but then when you take it too far, it's like, no, 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 no. I feel like the true underlying issue I have with this whole situation, and I feel an issue that people have with Jeffree Star just to begin with, is the fact that him sort of ignoring the hue and cry, him sort of not acknowledging or realizing how tone deaf the release was in the time, is just a showcase of his personal ignorance and his personal inability to really be empathetic towards the situation everyone else was in. And this wasn't just him. We had this issue with all the rich people during they were like, oh, we're quarantined. I'm like, you are quarantined in your 22 bedroom, 12 bathroom house with a pool and a game room. And so for him to just go full forward, full steam ahead with this without any thought to how it might affect the people who ultimately are buying his products just shows a super base level of ignorance and privilege, and really displays how out of touch he was with the situation. Because if you're empathetic towards the situation and you're aware of it, you're like, okay, yeah, this may not be offensive to me, but it's going to have an impact on other people. He seemed to lack that sort of rationale reality entirely. And not only that, another situation that I feel just sort of compounds this behavior and kind of proves it and shows it more as a pattern than an occasional passing, oh, I'm rich, so I'm not, I don't know anything about the 99% of the world. But this was when the California wildfires were going on. The air quality was absolutely abysmal. I had several YouTuber friends who were there. My aunt and her family, they all live up in California. They had like all their doors shut. They had one room that they had like a fan constantly going in, and they didn't go anywhere else. And there was that Snapchat of him where he just kind of walked out onto his whatever, and he was like, my goodness, the air quality is so bad. You can see the ashes in the air. I'm gonna hop up on my private jet and I'm gonna jet out of here to another state. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do what's best for you, but it's like, literally just coming out here and being all like, well, everything's on fire and everything's, falling down around me. I'm just gonna jet off and leave. Just shows a true level of detachment from the reality of the situations around them. Jeffree Star is definitely someone who exists within his own personal bubble. He isn't really interested in breaking free from his lifestyle or breaking free from his self-preservation ideology. In all of my time supporting Jeffree Star Cosmetics on my site, I had never, or at least I'd hoped I had never wanted to present that he was an amazing, empathetic human being. For me, the majority of it was about the banging quality of his products. But as someone who's sort of been in the whatever of Jeffree long before the makeup, he had never been someone who exuded a strong sense of empathetic energy. You know, yeah, he'll go on Twitter and be like, hey, give me your Cash App down below, and he gives away free this and gives away free that, and I'm like, that's great. But when you have that then compared to the whole organization and the situation of the cremated palette, where it truly is this release that sticks out at a time that just goes beyond a regular level of self-awareness and that kind of area of privilege where it isn't even a thought process to think, oh, this may be a cool, fun, edgy aesthetic for me, but for other people, it could have such deeper implications. And the same thing with the whole, oh, well, everything's fallen down, whatever, you know, I'm just gonna hop on a plane and get out of here because the state I live in is currently on fire. It's like, okay, you can do that, or maybe you could, you know, volunteer, you could help, you could, you know, there were how many people living in that like 90% awful air quality, and he can just say on Snapchat that I'm just gonna jet on out of here because I'm rich. It just really, I feel like the really horrifying, scary, distasteful underlying issues with the cremated palette go far beyond just that initial shock value of it being a palette about death during a pandemic. It really speaks louder volumes of what's going on with the makeup company, what's going on underneath it, and just that level of ignorant untouchableness where it doesn't even matter. You know, we're not even going to try to make something better because it just doesn't process to the person who's putting it out. And I feel like that's what people had issues with more than just the theme on a whole. It was the fact that it was so tone deaf, the fact that it was so off color, and the fact that there was no like, oh, yeah, maybe that is an issue. No acknowledgement that it was something off color. And like I said, artistic interpretation, I'm not someone to judge. I live for aesthetic. I live for whatever. But you can only say certain things for a certain amount of time before the whole behavior is just, it's a problematic consistency rather than an occasional disconnect. Okay, I love this. We've only been through 2 and we're going all like whatever. I'm gonna do another one. Clearly these are all kinds of talkies. If you've made it this far, leave some kind of something down below. But the next one we're going to talk about, I feel out of all of these, is the most opinion-based because I feel like Jeffree Star's entitled behavior and non-inclusive shade range should be like a universal issue. This next one is we're going to talk about Too Faced, and that is the glitter face mask glow job. I have talked about this particular product before. I will say I'm not a prude. I'm not someone who is, how shall I say, easily offended. Your girl has an OnlyFans and it's been one of the most liberating things I've ever done. So, but part of the issue I have with this, I have done a video about this, and that's talking about the sexualization of makeup. And this is another one of those things, this is very subjective. It's also one of those things that on the surface may seem kind of, that's fine. Why are we whining about it? Because there are still some underlying issues. You know, it's like you're just breezing across it and you're like, okay, it's a blush named orgasm. It's a face mask named glow job. You know, how deep can it be? And then you look at it and you're like, it's another one of those things where it's like, aesthetic and artistic whatever only goes so far. It is very much up to personal interpretation. Probably the thing that offends me the most about the glow job face mask is the fact that it had glitter in it. And as someone who is very passionate about skincare, I am 100% sure that glitter has absolutely no skincare benefits. So why the flip, or are you putting it in a face mask? Probably because I think Too Faced actually knows like next to nothing about skincare, and they're like, let's just put some glitter in this schviz and call it a glow job and it'll be funny. You know, do I have issues with it being named a glow job and it, you know, is something that goes on your face? For those of you who know, you know. And it's just kind of one of those things where you're just like, all right, at what point does it go beyond funny? At what point does it go beyond tongue-in-cheek? At what point is it just stupid and distasteful? And at what point is that something that matters and needs to be called out? Because if you think about NARS, you know, NARS orgasm, although I find it kind of funny that Francois NARS talking about it was all like, well, I wanted to evoke like emotions and feelings and sensations, and that's why he did orgasm. I'm like, okay, what feelings and sensations are you trying to evoke with naming another blush Deep Throat? I will wait, let me know. And so this is something, when I did my one video, it was very, very divided. We had those who were like, yeah, we kind of put a little bit too much of the emphasis on the sexualization on makeup. And then you had other people that were like, well, you know, it's for adults. It's let adults do what they want to do. And it's again one of those things that isn't just this cut and dry, whether it's right or wrong. I talked in the beginning, you know, ethics and morality and personal whatevers. But part of what I have issues with this, and this is again with all of this, with doing this series, I was just starting talking about like controversial whatever. But the more I've looked into products and the more I've thought about like my talking points, I've realized that this series is more a discussion of the underlying problematic layers that have become ingrained within mainstream makeup marketing. And this particular thing isn't just makeup, it's just marketing on a whole. And that is the overt, truly sexualization of the marketing of anything. It's just like, okay, we're selling a lipstick, sex. Okay, we're selling a car, sex. Okay, we're selling whatever. You know, it's all about that sort of idealized sexualization. And like I said, I'm not a prude. I'm not a whatever. So it is very subjective depending on what your whatever amoral something is. But there is also the issue of marketing. And there's an issue with like who you're marketing to. When I did my video, a lot of people were like, well, you know, this makeup isn't marketed towards kids. You know, they're not coming in and they're not buying it. So why is it a problem? And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, okay, all right, it's not marketed toward that. Just because it's not marketed towards that, does it have to be this? You know, and it's not just talking about like younger kids. I remember me and my friend Cameron, he and I used to go to every single of those like Vice palette releases, you know, where you'd go in and you buy the Vice palette and they'd do your makeup with it and all kinds of shiz. And he and I were very familiar with the Urban Decay counter people at this one particular Ulta. And they would talk about it and they'd be like, yeah, it's always so funny when we come in and we get this little old lady that's like, oh, I love this lipstick. What's it called? And they're like, well, it's called F-bomb. You know, there's kind of that fine divide between like edgy and fun and then just sort of throwing whatever to the wind because it's edgy. I mean, and it's not just the Too Faced glow job. You've got Urban Decay that has had a white shade called Bump. You know, you can be fun, you can be creative without having to encourage, you know, those sorts of things. And again, it goes on beyond even just glow job. You know, KVD had a liquid lipstick named Underage Red, you know, and when called out for it, she was like, well, it's not about, you know, being underage red. It's about like there was a red lipstick that I used for my mom that I wore when I was like 16. I'm like, okay, you can explain it away to a certain extent, but it's still sort of procking off of that. It's the same sort of thing of naming one of the lipstick shades Lolita. You know, you can explain it away, you can say it's artistic interpretation, but people are gonna think a certain thing. And I feel like Kat Von D, kind of with Jeffree Star, she's not dumb. You know, they're not going to come back from the polls and be like, well, people think about this particular book when you name it this, and she's not going to be like, oh, I had absolutely no idea that was going to happen. I mean, come on, you know that's going to happen. And then I believe Kylie had a blush that was called like Underage Red or something like that, and her demographic is definitely underage. So I don't want to hear about how a lot of makeup isn't marketed towards teens and tweens and all that jazz. It is a personal preference sort of situation, but it's something that I think needs to be discussed rather than just being kind of fluffed off as, oh, well, it's expensive makeup, so it shouldn't be an issue. You know, even if it's expensive makeup, you know, I don't want a lipstick that's like DSL. I'm like, I'm good, and maybe that's just me. And it all has to do with marketing and your personal whatever. I mean, like if you take into consideration B-Slap Cosmetics and they do it, that's all they do. They're just like, they are raunchy, they are out there, they are doing this specifically for that. But that's their thing. That's what they're marketing themselves as. You know, they're not going out there and being like, this is our aesthetic, and then tiptoeing through the tulips. Whereas you have Urban Decay and Too Faced and all these other brands that are like, So it's that consistency, it's that ingrained, it's a personal thing, it's me, it's my whatever, but I do feel it's something that shouldn't just be, oh, okay, whatever, it's just a thing, just let it be. You know, a lot of these things that I've learned that all are an intricate part of makeup consumerism and the beauty community, I feel like we should be allowed and deserve to have more discussion about, because there is. Oh, pretty eyeshadow palette. I do try-ons, I do reviews, I do whatever. I like makeup, I like beating the face. But I also like, as a consumer, to be allowed to critique and discuss the behavior showcased from the companies that I purchase or don't purchase from. It's my right, and I'm gonna take it, and I'm gonna run with it. Okay, that is all I have got time for y'all today. I apologize. I think we talked about like 3 things, kind of some other things. This has really become sort of just a more discussion, in-depth based outlet for me. Y'all know, as much as I love reviewing and trying on and playing with makeup, I really do love taking that more critical step back and having a discussion, because there is makeup, and then there are so many other underlying layers that make it a lot deeper than you might think, and I feel like there is an appropriate time for both. I would love to hear you all's respectful thoughts about this down below. We all have different opinions. We don't need to fight. I would also love to hear controversial, off-color, off-tone, off-putting makeup releases that you have down below. Maybe you want me to talk about them. But thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you so much for being with me through my more talky opinion-based videos. I love you, and as always, keep it real. Mwah!